Older adults, pay close attention. Senate Bill 2184, known as the Senior Fraud Protection Act, has officially been signed into law. Here is what they are leaving out. Stop what you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear could return thousands of dollars to your pocket and shield everything you have dedicated a lifetime to creating. The majority of American seniors will never even hear about this. A groundbreaking piece of legislation has just passed through the United States Senate and is being quietly described as the most focused and most impactful senior fraud protection measure ever enacted at the federal level. It goes by the name Senate Bill 2184, the Senior Fraud Protection Act. And whether you are over 60, caring for an elderly parent, approaching your retirement years, or already depending on Social Security and Medicare to get by, this law has a direct effect on your finances, your personal safety, your home, and your long-term future. But here's the part that ought to make your blood boil. The major media outlets are barely scratching the surface of what this legislation actually contains. They handed you the headline, then moved straight along to the next story. Meanwhile, millions of older Americans across this country have absolutely no idea what is truly written inside this bill, what protections they are now legally guaranteed, or, and this part is absolutely critical, what deadlines they might miss if they fail to act quickly. Some of the safeguards built into this law activate automatically. Many others do not. Some demand that you register. Some require you to update existing records. Some carry enrollment windows that, if you hesitate too long, you will lose permanently. So today, we are going to walk through every major provision in plain, everyday language. No legal terminology, no political agenda, just the real, practical, dollar and cents truth about what has changed for retired Americans and the families who love them. Grab something to write with, take notes, and pass this along to every older adult in your life. Let us dive in. First, let me explain where this bill originated and why it carries such weight at this particular moment. For decades, American seniors have been quietly losing the most significant financial battle of their lives, not because of market collapses or poor investment choices, but because of organized, deliberately targeted, and relentless criminal fraud. Each and every year, older Americans lose an estimated $36 billion to financial fraud and exploitation. $36 billion. That figure is not a minor miscalculation. That is not a small footnote buried in a report. That is more money than the entire annual budget of certain federal agencies draining out of the retirement accounts, Social Security deposits, pension payments, and life savings of individuals who worked 40 and 50 years to accumulate what they had. And the federal response, through legal systems and enforcement agencies, has for many decades been insufficient, disjointed, reactive, and chronically short on resources. Senate Bill 2184 changes that reality. It is the most thorough, the most generously funded, and the most operationally committed anti-fraud legislation ever aimed specifically at defending older Americans. The reason we need to examine it carefully is simple. The news cycle is relentless. The real financial value, the true protection, and the genuinely life-altering consequences of this law are buried inside the specifics, and those specifics are precisely what no one is taking the time to explain. Let us walk through every major provision this law introduces, beginning with the one that is already sending shockwaves through the fraud industry. The first major provision is the establishment of the Senior Fraud Prevention and Response Fund. This is a dedicated, permanent, federally protected funding stream of $400 million annually, directed exclusively towards senior fraud prevention, investigation, prosecution, and victim recovery efforts. This is not a grant program requiring annual renewal. This is not money that can be quietly shuffled toward another priority when political winds shift. It is a permanently protected funding stream written directly into the body of the law. legally shielded from being redirected for any other purpose. $400 million every single year devoted to nothing beyond protecting seniors from financial predators. What does that funding actually accomplish in day-to-day terms? It finances the hiring of 500 new specialized fraud investigators distributed across the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, each with a single defined mission. Not broad financial crime, not white-collar fraud in general, but specifically elder financial fraud. These are investigators trained in the particular tactics predators use against older adults, trained to recognize patterns, trained to move with greater speed than the existing system allows, and trained to prioritize cases that currently pile up in backlogs and are never resolved simply because there are not enough personnel to address them. The fund additionally establishes 37 new senior fraud rapid response units spread across every federal circuit, meaning that when a fraud complaint is submitted by a senior in rural Alabama or suburban Oregon, there is now a trained, properly funded, specifically designated unit close enough to respond within 72 hours, rather than logging the case onto a waiting list that stretches for months without movement. And here is the provision that will make the most concrete difference in the lives of people who are victimized: the Victim Recovery Fund. Embedded within S2184 is a clause that allows a court, upon the conviction of a fraud perpetrator who specifically preyed upon seniors, to order restitution drawn from a federal victim recovery fund before the criminal's own assets are fully liquidated. That means a senior who lost $30,000 to a romance scam does not have to sit and wait for the perpetrator to be convicted, sentenced, instructed to repay, actually make payment, and for those funds to clear, a sequence that routinely takes 3 to 7 years and frequently yields nothing because the criminal possesses no recoverable assets. Under this law, verified victims aged 65 and older can apply for interim recovery from the federal fund while the criminal proceeding continues. The money does not get swallowed by the legal process. It is returned to the person who lost it in the first place. The second major provision addresses something that has been exploited by financial predators for years, with virtually no meaningful consequences: the Social Security number security gap affecting seniors. At this moment, your Social Security number, that 9-digit key unlocking your entire financial identity, is being used in more transactions, applications, and data systems than at any previous point in American history. And for seniors, particularly those who do not actively monitor their credit or routinely check their financial statements, the time gap between when a Social Security number is stolen and when the victim actually discovers the theft can stretch across months or even years. During that gap, the damage multiplies. New credit accounts are opened fraudulently. Tax refunds are illegally redirected. Medicare benefits are claimed by identity thieves who submit billing for services that were never actually delivered. S2184 introduces the first mandatory real-time senior identity alert system. Here is exactly how it functions. The Social Security Administration will now cross-reference every Social Security number belonging to an individual aged 62 or older against a continuously updated database of documented fraud patterns and suspicious activity flags every single day. When a flag is triggered, an alert is dispatched immediately to the senior's registered contact information, not routed to a credit bureau that takes months to process the information, not forwarded to a collection agency that uncovers the problem only after serious damage has already occurred, sent directly to the senior or their designated trusted contact within 24 hours of the suspicious activity being identified. If you do not currently have a My Social Security account at ssa.gov, creating one this week has become one of the most critical financial protection actions available to you because the identity alert system operates through that online account. Without one, the alerts have no destination to reach. And for seniors who feel uncertain about setting up the account on their own, S2184 funds a network of free in-person assistance sessions at every Social Security Administration office and every participating public library nationwide. Simply walk in, bring your Social Security card and a current photo ID. A trained assistant will set up your account, register your trusted contact, and activate your alert preferences completely free of any charge. The third major provision places new obligations on banks, credit unions, and every financial institution holding accounts that belong to senior customers. For years, financial institutions have occupied a uniquely powerful position within the fraud protection landscape. They are frequently the first place where fraud becomes visible. A sudden large withdrawal, a wire transfer to an account with no prior history, a new signatory quietly added to a long-established account. Yet they have historically operated under an inconsistent and largely ineffective collection of voluntary guidelines and state-by-state regulations regarding when and how to intervene on a customer's behalf. S2184 establishes the first unified national standard for how financial institutions must behave when suspected elder financial exploitation is detected. Under the new law, any bank, credit union, brokerage house, or financial services company holding accounts for customers aged 62 or older must now implement a specific senior account monitoring protocol. Every institution must designate and train a senior account protection officer at every branch location. Every institution must maintain a documented written policy governing how suspected exploitation situations are to be handled, including defined hold procedures, mandatory reporting obligations, and specific victim notification timelines. And every institution that identifies a transaction pattern consistent with financial exploitation of a senior must file a suspicious activity report within 48 hours and simultaneously contact the account holder directly rather than waiting passively for the account holder to reach out to them first. The law also establishes genuine liability for institutions that fail to comply with these protocols. Under previous law, a bank that neglected to flag an unmistakable exploitation situation faced almost no meaningful consequences beyond potential reputational harm. Under Section 2184, a financial institution that fails to follow the new mandatory protocols and a senior suffers documented losses, as a direct result can now be held financially responsible for a portion of those losses. That represents an entirely different incentive structure. Institutions that were previously passive are now legally required to be proactive, and those that fail to act proactively carry a financial motivation to change their behavior. The practical implication for you as a senior account holder is significant. Within 90 days of this law taking effect, contact your bank or credit union and ask 3 specific questions. First, who is the designated senior account protection officer at your branch? Second, what is the specific transaction alert threshold established for accounts like mine? Third, how do I add a trusted contact to my account so that if a suspicious transaction is identified, there is someone you can notify immediately? Asking those 3 questions establishes you as an engaged and informed account holder and creates a documented record of your awareness that can prove valuable should you ever find yourself in a dispute with the institution over how they managed a potential exploitation situation affecting your funds. The 4th major provision addresses what the FBI has identified as the most rapidly expanding and most psychologically destructive form of elder financial fraud: romance and relationship scams deliberately targeting isolated seniors. Currently, there is no federal criminal statute that specifically targets relationship-based financial fraud committed against older adults. Perpetrators are charged under general wire fraud, mail fraud, or money laundering statutes when they are charged at all. The penalties assigned to these offenses do not reflect the uniquely predatory nature of targeting a grieving widow or a lonely widower with a deliberately fabricated emotional relationship, engineered from the beginning with the sole purpose of draining their savings. Sentences are equivalent to those handed down in any other financial fraud case carrying the same dollar figure, without any consideration of the victim's age or the specific vulnerability that was deliberately exploited. S2184 creates a new, independent federal criminal offense called elder emotional manipulation fraud. This new statute specifically criminalizes the deliberate act of developing a romantic or deeply personal relationship with an individual aged 65 or older specifically to facilitate financial exploitation, with significantly enhanced penalties when the stolen amount exceeds $25,000, when the victim was living alone at the time of the offense, when the perpetrator deliberately used the victim's grief or isolation as their primary manipulation tool, or when the victim suffered documented psychological harm in addition to their financial losses. The enhanced penalties under this statute increase the minimum federal sentence by as much as 50% above the standard fraud baseline, and they permit the court to impose mandatory restitution from the Victim Recovery Fund in advance of the perpetrator's other legal financial obligations being addressed. This matters not solely as a legal deterrent, which it absolutely is, but as a meaningful statement. For the first time in federal law, a statute states explicitly that targeting a lonely older adult with a manufactured relationship is not simply fraud. It is a specific, distinct, and more serious category of predatory criminal conduct that the federal government intends to pursue with greater determination and punish with greater severity than it has at any prior point in history. The fifth major provision focuses on Medicare fraud, which is simultaneously one of the largest contributors to escalating costs across the entire federal healthcare system, and one of the most direct ways seniors suffer personal financial harm from criminal activity, both as victims of identity theft and as beneficiaries who lose access to services they genuinely need because fraudulent billing has already exhausted their coverage limits. S2184 directs $120 million specifically toward Medicare fraud detection and investigation, including the implementation of artificial intelligence monitoring systems capable of identifying billing patterns consistent with fraud within days, rather than the months or years the existing manual review process typically requires. The law also introduces the first Medicare fraud victim recovery program, designed specifically for seniors who have suffered documented loss of coverage or denied access to care resulting from fraudulent billing submitted under their Medicare number. If your Medicare number was used to bill for services you never actually received, and you subsequently lost access to services you legitimately required because your benefit limits had been fraudulently exhausted, you may now file a recovery claim that will be processed within 60 days, and that can result in full restoration of your benefit access, along with an additional credit applied toward future covered services. If you have ever received an explanation of benefit statement from Medicare reflecting charges for services you have no memory of receiving, that document is exactly what you need to preserve. Begin a dedicated file today. Every explanation of benefit statement showing an unfamiliar charge represents a potential recovery claim that could now be filed on your behalf. S2184 makes that recovery process genuinely accessible for the very first time. The sixth major provision involves what the legislation refers to as the Senior Housing Fraud Protection Provisions, and they directly address a category of financial exploitation that has grown dramatically in recent years as the senior housing market has become simultaneously more valuable and more predatory. Reverse mortgage fraud, home repair schemes, fraudulent property deed transfers, and exploitative senior living facility contracts have financially devastated thousands of families who believed they were making prudent decisions about how to manage their most substantial financial asset, their home. S2184 creates 3 new protections within this category. First, a mandatory 3-day cooling-off period for any financial transaction involving the primary residence of an individual aged 65 or older, during which the transaction cannot be completed, and the senior must receive written notification of their legal right to rescind. Second, mandatory independent legal review for any deed transfer or reverse mortgage transaction involving a senior account holder, with the cost of that review paid by the institution or party seeking to complete the transaction rather than by the senior themselves. Third, a new federal certification requirement for any organization marketing housing services or housing transitions specifically to older adults, along with loss of certification and prohibition from all federal program participation for any organization determined to have engaged in deceptive practices targeting seniors. The seventh and final major provision is the one I want you to absorb most completely, because it is the change that requires you to take personal action, not eventually. Not when you find time, but this week. S2184 establishes a National Senior Fraud Registry, a voluntary opt-in database administered by the Federal Trade Commission that allows older adults to register themselves as eligible for enhanced protections under the terms of the law. Once enrolled, your name is added to a database that financial institutions, telephone service providers, and verified organizations are legally required to consult before completing certain high-risk transactions on your behalf. When your name appears in the registry, those transactions trigger additional verification requirements before they can proceed to completion. It is not an impenetrable barrier, but it represents a meaningful and additional layer of protection against the automated, high-volume fraud operations that use stolen personal information to complete fraudulent transactions before any human review can take place. Registration carries no cost. The process takes roughly 15 minutes to complete. It is handled through the Federal Trade Commission's official website at ftc.gov. You will need your social security number, your date of birth, and contact information for a trusted individual in your life who can be notified if a transaction linked to your registry enrollment is flagged as suspicious. After completing registration, you will receive a confirmation notice and a unique registry reference number that you can share with your bank, your Medicare plan administrator, and any other institution where you want the enhanced protection protocols to apply. Here is precisely what you need to do right now. And I mean this week, not next month, not whenever you eventually get around to it. Visit ftc.gov and complete your enrollment in the National Senior Fraud Registry. If you are not comfortable completing the process online, you may call the FTC's Senior Fraud Dedicated Hotline at 1-877-382-4357 and finish the registration process entirely by telephone. Go to ssa.gov and either create or verify your My Social Security account. If you would prefer to handle this step in person with assistance, your nearest Social Security Administration office and participating public library locations now provide free guided setup sessions under the terms of S2184. Contact your bank and ask the 3 specific questions covered earlier in this discussion. Who serves as the Senior Account Protection Officer? What transaction alert threshold is in place for accounts like mine? How do I add a trusted contact to my account on record? Pull out your Medicare explanation of benefit statements from the past 12 months and carefully review them for any charge associated with a service you have no memory of receiving. If you identify one, contact Medicare directly at 1-800-633-4227 and file a report. Under the new Medicare Fraud Victim Recovery Program created by S2184, you may be eligible for benefit restoration. And here is the single most critical warning I can offer before we conclude. Fraudsters operate with extraordinary speed. Within days of significant legislation like this being officially signed into law, criminal networks are already crafting telephone scripts built around it. Right now, as you watch this video, there are individuals calling seniors across the country claiming to represent the FTC, Medicare, or the Social Security Administration, offering their assistance in helping seniors enroll in the new protections established under Senate Bill 2184. Every single one of those phone calls is a scam without exception. The federal government does not make unsolicited cold calls to seniors to help them sign up for new legal protections. Registration is something you complete voluntarily through official government websites or through official government telephone numbers that you personally look up and dial yourself. The FTC will not call you uninvited. The legitimate FTC number, the one you dial yourself, is 1-877-382-4357. The Social Security Administration will not call you demanding that you take immediate action. The legitimate SSA number, the one you dial yourself, is 1-800-772-1213. Medicare will not call asking you to read your card number aloud to a stranger. The legitimate Medicare number, the one you dial yourself, is 1-800-633-4227. If anyone contacts you by phone and offers to help you enroll in the new senior fraud protections while requesting any personal information whatsoever, end the call immediately. Then reach out to a trusted family member or your designated trusted contact and tell them exactly what occurred. Let me close by inviting you to reflect on your own personal experience. Think back on the moments when the system seemed as though it was never designed with you in mind. Perhaps it was a phone call that nearly cost you your entire life savings. Perhaps it was a bank statement revealing a charge from a company you had never once contacted. Perhaps it was the sickening moment when you discovered that someone had been quietly siphoning money from your accounts, and you had absolutely no idea who to contact or what steps to take. Perhaps it was watching a neighbor, a close friend, or a parent go through something similar and feeling completely powerless to intervene or make it stop. Senate Bill 2184 does not resolve every problem seniors face. No single piece of legislation can accomplish that. But it represents a genuine, serious, and properly funded effort to provide every older adult in this country with a stronger defense against the individuals who have built an entire criminal enterprise around targeting you specifically. And more than anything else, it sends a clear message that legislators examined the true scale of this epidemic and collectively decided that enough was enough. The predators will not surrender quietly. They will adjust their tactics. They will identify new vulnerabilities to exploit. They always have, and they always will. Which is precisely why staying informed, enrolling in every protection this law makes available, and sharing this information with every senior you care about is not merely helpful. It is absolutely essential. Knowledge is power in the arena of elder financial fraud. It is also the single most dependable form of protection that is available to you right now. Share this with every senior you know,